Right. Uh, Hello, everyone. This is Trent Blizzard with Modern Foragers. I'm here with Kristen.
Hello.
And we're ready to kick off a webinar with Eugenia Bone today. Let me pull her up. Here we go. Say hi, Eugenia.
Hi.
Hi, Eugenia. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be with you again, even though there's no mushrooms at the moment.
I know. Not here either. It's pretty dry. Although parts of Colorado are getting rain, but not where we are, unfortunately.
No, I meant the last time I saw you guys, we found so many mushrooms that, you know, we had what people used to call duck fever, where there's so many ducks, you just couldn't shoot at the right, you know, at the right one. It was just, yeah.
That was an amazing day in Paonia. Yes, it was.
That might not happen again for a long time. You know, not just a lot of them, but they were all little perfect buttons, and we filled our basket.
Yeah, I know. It was fun. I'm still high on that. They're like
We're still eating those mushrooms.
Yeah.
So welcome, Eugenia. For everybody that's joining us, Eugenia is a writer. And she has written, I don't know, 7, 8 books. I think we have several of your books, cookbooks and science books. And I think, you know, to really understand you, you're a writer who has really surrounded your words with a lot of science, ecology, microbiology, and all that. So I think it puts you in a really unique position to talk to us today about science. And my hope is 90 minutes from now that as I put it, scientific literacy is going to be that much better about unseen things.
Great. Let's do it.
Yeah. A couple things about you. It'd be good to kind of chat about you for a minute. First of all, your location. You're in New York City right now in Soho. Maybe say a word about that.
Yeah, so Soho's been very tense for the last few days. We had 3 nights of looting, a kind of smash and grab style looting, but it's really been very organized with like these cars that line up on the street, and then the guys run into the stores. They have all these tools to break down wood paneling. They empty out the stores. They load them into the cars and vans, and then the vehicles, you know, slip away, and another set comes along. And so there seems to be 2 big crews that have been working in Soho. No protesters. These are not like associated protesters at all. This is your basic organized crime. And they've been hitting all over the neighborhood, but we've had 3 really it's just heartbreaking on a lot of levels. I mean, you know, am I sorry for Chanel for being ripped off? Not that much, but you know, and I really feel for these kids who I think maybe were roped into this life, and you know, the circumstances that got them there are screwed up. But mainly, I was just scared. Yeah. I've just been scared for a few days. That's all.
Well, we might hear some sirens in the background.
Yeah, so if you hear sirens and you hear like helicopters and yelling and stuff, you know. But I think it's further west tonight. I don't know if and hopefully it's kind of calmed down. We'll see.
It's not dark there yet though, is it?
No, no. It's mainly once it gets dark that it happens. The curfews are in place. We have an 8 p.m. curfew. So it's starting now according to New York time. We'll see what happens.
Meanwhile, though, we generally will run across you at mycological conferences and festivals, and you often speak about preservation and food and this kind of unseen world there. Are you really jonesing for some mushroom action here going into the summer? And
totally. This time of year, usually I am like this big treat that I give myself every May is I fly out to San Francisco, and then I drive across the Grand Valley, and I meet up with David Campbell in the Sierra Nevadas, where we hunt burns that he's been that he's staked out for burn morels, and it's just glorious. You know, it's just these huge forests and all of this dead timber. It's really so fun. And of course this year, because of COVID, that was out. so that was the bummer. I went to visit a friend's orchard. A friend had scoped out an orchard upstate, and we went to check it out. And it's like, I got ticks, I got poison ivy, and I got one little morel. And I was like,
the burns, they ruin you, don't they? Once you go to burns, it's hard to kind of get excited about some of the other morel opportunities. I mean, you still do, but you're always comparing them to buckets of morels.
Yeah, and
it's like being somebody that's used to drinking, a bottle of wine at night, who then gets served like a little tiny glass, and they're like, "Is this all there is?"
Yeah. Yeah, we have a strange relationship with burns too, because it's devastating, obviously, but at the same time, it's beautiful, and we're constantly getting rewarded. So it's a weird mental game sometimes.
But it's also, you see life resurging. So it's ultimately optimistic.
Yes,
the fire's done, and here comes this life. It's not just the morels, but all the little bear grasses and things like that that speak to rebirth.
Yes.
More positive than rebirth.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of species that only really survive and thrive in that apocalyptic burn area for a year or two. So it's part of our biome. I might have totally just used that word. But that would be a good, but we're going to jump now into some content. Let me just do some house cleaning. Housekeeping. I always say cleaning, and I shouldn't. It's housekeeping.
He doesn't clean the house.
So maybe you should do this.
No,
we have a chat here. This is a great time for our attendees who are listening. Say hi on chat. Introduce yourself. I see Beth.
Hi, Beth.
Elizabeth, hi.
Now, if someone has a birthday today, oh no, that's something else. Okay, never mind. If you're having a birthday, though, say hi.
Happy birthday if it's your birthday.
And we also have a Q&A area, and if you put it in chat, we all get to see it. Hi, Mayumi.
Hey, Mayumi.
And if you put it into Q&A, that's more private, and we will share that and get your questions answered that way. So feel free to do either chat or Q&A while we're in here. That's it for my housekeeping. So let's talk about now the unseen world. What is it like? How do you put words to things you don't see, and what are they?
Microbes.
So when we're talking about the unseen world, we're talking about microscopic organisms, right? Organisms that are too small to see with the naked eye. But you can see with a microscope to varying degrees. And these microscopic organisms, it's very easy to not, we feel their effects. Like if you go to the La Brea tar pits in LA and you see those bubbles of methane gas, well, you're seeing the effects, right, of bacteria living in there and doing their thing, metabolizing the petroleum. But but most of the time, you don't really see the effects, or you don't know you're seeing the effects. And so one of the things that takes a real mental leap is to imagine our world is completely and totally populated by organisms affecting everything from weather to your whether you have bad breath or not. They're affecting everything on all scales, and so the challenge is how to see them, how to imagine them, how to understand them, how to be able to use your understanding of them to make good decisions about your life and about your health and your family and your planet, for that matter. So that would include fungi and bacteria. Those are the two organisms that I'm most interested in, but there's others, protists and archaea. And there's also single-celled plants, but I'm less interested in those.
What were the last two?
I don't know very much about them.
What were the last two?
So fungi, bacteria, and archaea, which are similar to bacteria. All right, so let's start in the very beginning. Like very beginning, 4 billion years ago. The first organisms on Earth were single-celled organisms bacteria and archaea. People think archaea maybe are the older ones, and they are no bigger than a cell. That's the smallest you can be and still be a living thing. Mm-hmm. And the bacteria is one type, and they're sort of defined. They have very different cell walls and makeups from this other thing called archaea, also single cell. Makeup of the cell wall, very different. But that's enough of a difference for them to be two separate kingdoms altogether. And so bacteria and archaea were the first organisms. Archaea are like the extremophiles today, you know, that you read about, living in those underwater deep sea vents. They are able to survive all kinds of bizarre and intense environments, extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme drought, you know, that kind of thing. And then there's bacteria, which people know a little bit more about, and which are very, very close friends and enemies of ours. So bacteria and archaea, single-celled, and then other really microscopic critters are microscopic fungi, microscopic plants. I don't know very much about them. And then there's protists, and there's probably microscopic animals, but I don't know about them. And then there's protists, which is this, like when you see images of pond scum and there's like things crawling around in it, that's like a lot of those are protists. And protists are kind of cool because they're not plants, they're not animals, and they're not fungi. But you have like protists that are like proto-fungi, proto-plants, and proto-animals. They're like the thing that animals went on to become. They are the things from which animals evolved.
Okay.
So those are the microbes, and they are, you know, everywhere. Like, you know, hello, there's like all of them, and fungi and bacteria, and some are in archaea to a degree, and of course viruses, but viruses aren't alive, so we talk about them in a different way.
Oh, okay.
So that's like, yeah. And, you know, when you think about those, so the bacteria, for example, and archaea, they invented life. They invented living. They're the first things on the planet. They were, you know, they figured out how to make a living on a planet that was pretty hostile, methane gas. You know, they found out how to make a living on methane gas.
Our dogs are outside barking like crazy, so
okay, you want to let them in?
Let them in. Sorry about that.
So that, you know, so these, in the beginning of life on the planet, these organisms, these bacteria and archaea, you know, they made their livings in really weird ways, you know, living off of ammonia and stuff like that. And then one type of bacteria called a cyanobacteria, about, I don't know, 3 billion years ago or so, figured out how to photosynthesize. And so there was a lot of sunshine, there was a lot of water, and those bacteria were really successful, and they actually oxygenated the planet.
Like algae type.
Yeah, they're photosynthesizing bacteria. And after that, if you weren't an oxygen respiring organism, you know, life was pretty tough. You had to go find somewhere to hide. You had to live somewhere where there wasn't air.
And that took, I assume, 1 billion years or something to do.
Well, yeah, and things change, you know, fast for bacteria. In fact, small organisms produce lots of offspring. You know, it's just one of these ecological kind of laws. So, you know, bacteria, they produce lots and lots of offspring, and then there's all these mutations, and so they're able, and offspring is a weird word because they just divide, but with all those mutations, there was more and more variation. And with more variation, you have more changes in environment that are caused by all those different critters, you know, and eventually you find us where, you know, we came onto the story.
So how does that like bring that into our lives now? Those small single cell creatures. creatures.
Well, so fungi really have a very, very primary role helping plants. There's a lot of your listeners are going to know because I'm sure people are up to speed on mycorrhiza, right? And there's microbial, the little tiny fungi. Well, mycorrhiza are pretty tiny too, unless they're massing right into mycelium. But the endophytic fungi, for example, helped plants become terrestrial because the endophytes, that's in the fungi that live between the cells of plants. All plants have fungi living between their cells. They, those endophytic fungi provide all these duties. If you look, there's a picture, I think, of the stress tolerance of maybe of rice. Do you see that picture?
Yeah, let me put that up for everybody to see. This one here with healthy and not healthy plants.
Right. So these endophytes, they help plants deal with all kinds of stresses like salt. They provide antioxidants. Plants are like us. When their cells get stressed out from drought or salt inundation or whatever, they produce particles that are harmful to their cells. So the endophytes produce like antioxidants. It's like they suppress that self-destructive process so the plant is able to survive the heat or the salt or the drought. And that's what endophytes did to help plants move from the cool, wet oceans to the dry, but very sunny and lots of real estate environment of terra firma. And to this day, endophytes are present in just about in every I think they're supposed to be in every plant, endophytes, doing these jobs of stress tolerance. It's an ancient job. So think of it, the ancient job that the fungi did to help plants survive the day, bacteria have done for us. So we have this really key relationship with our bacterial symbionts. It's the unseen world that is also us, that is in us, and that is a part of our every living day.
What does the endophytic fungus get from the plant, right? In return, like what's the relationship there? 'Cause it sounds like they're very tightly together.
Well, it's got habitat, and it's got sugars that the plant makes as a result of photosynthesis, because the endophyte doesn't make carbon. Fungi, they're like us. They have to get their food from somewhere else. They don't make their own food like a plant. So the endophytic fungi has to get its food somewhere too. And so it's getting its food from the plant. And in exchange for food and habitat, it provides this service. So the plant tolerates the parasite because it's a helpful parasite.
Yeah, it's like a fleece jacket or something.
It
keeps you.
It's like air.
So this is the same relationship that a porcini has to a spur and spruce tree on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not really, no, because
Maybe for the layperson. But
Okay.
the mycorrhizae, they're really involved in nutrition acquisition, and they will also seem to do some roles in communication, helping trees, plants become alert to predators, aphids or whatever that's tormenting plants in the vicinity. But by and large, they're involved in a nutritional exchange.
Right.
The endophytic fungi are involved in endophytic fungi were present when plants made their transition from water to land. And it was their presence that allowed plants to make that transition. They help plants become, it was like this wonderful guy, he just wrote a book, Merlin Sheldrake. He said, algae plus fungi equals terrestrial plants. you know, and he's right, because to get onto Earth, the plants that had been in the water all along, and they needed some help. I mean, it was dry, it was hot, they didn't have roots, you know, so mycorrhizae could help them with the root problem, getting nutrition, but the endophytes help them survive the day, like the UV rays, the lack of moisture.
So they're more integral to life, essentially.
Well, you know,
In a sense.
it's difficult to say more or less, because, you know, a plant without its mycorrhizae looks pretty shitty, and a plant without its endophytes looks pretty shitty.
Okay.
But what's really, what's particularly interesting to me about endophytes today is that they are going to be, and it's becoming more and more evident how important they are to our food supply in a changing climate.
Huh.
As the places get hotter, wetter, sea levels rise, more salt distributed in low-lying areas like rice paddies, then you're going to need your endophytes to help the plants survive that. And here's what's incredibly cool, and what these people figured out in Oregon, and now it's widespread research going on. But this relationship between the endophytic fungi that's inside plant, and there are all these different species, between the endophytic fungi and the plant host is so ancient. This type of relationship is so ancient that it precedes plant diversification on Earth. So what that means is that an endophyte that helps a grass survive growing in 180-degree hot spring land, Earth, can be transferred to a tomato plant, so that tomato plant will produce tomatoes at 180 degrees.
Without any sort of genetic modification.
Nope.
So are there scientists then that are manipulating these endophytes with different plants, and
They're moving them around and saying, wow, does it work on this? Does it work on that? You know, can we grow, zucchini at these incredible temperatures, or with lower, or can we grow rice in places where there's more salt inundation? Can we grow soy in places that looks like it's going to have drought?
Oh, I have a picture of that from you here.
We were talking about this in a sense last week with Trad, because those guys at Mushroom Mountain sell microgranules that they add to their tiny baby seed plants. And I don't know anything about anything, but it sounded like though that is an endophytic fungi that is a beneficial one for your garden, that if you're inoculating those young plants early, it will kind of take over the role that its native endophytes might have played in a better way.
There is a huge industry in this right now. There's all kinds of patents being submitted. There's companies formed. I mean, Monsanto is in this business. And, whatever you think of them, they follow the money.
Right.
So, that's the good bet is endophytic fungi. There is a lot of interesting stuff about it. And there's, they've always been around. It's just that we don't know very, it's because it's part of the unseen world. You look at the plant and you just see plant. But the fact is, plant is not just plant. Plant is plant and fungi.
And then, and even then, it's so important. We never see it in the garden store. It's, as a consumer, I haven't, read in my gardening blogs about the importance of this. I mean, or maybe I missed it, but it's kind of weird. This important thing that Monsanto is playing with is not really available to us at the consumer level, which is why we were excited when we saw Trad's product.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't know you were reading gardening blogs, by the way.
It's on I have the news feed, and
Who
gardening
knew?
is one of my topics. Tomatoes.
It's new. you know, the science has been going on, it's been growing over the last decade, but, you know, things take a long time to come to market. But I believe there's a variety of what, you know, it's like, how do you patent it, you know, and stuff like that. There's all kinds of companies are dealing with things in different ways. But one thing that Monsanto is into, for example, is, and other companies, is to create seed. When you purchase the seed, it's ready to go with its endophytic fungi that produce these tolerances. Now there's more. Since we're talking about endophytes, which are so cool, they also provide, some other species provide defense functions. They're full of alkaloids that make you, or make their predators super sick when they eat them. So there's fescue grass, for example. It's like really great for your golf courses and stuff. But if your pony eats a certain type that's infected with endophytic fungi, it'll cause gangrene of the hoof in your cow or your pony or whatever. So the animal can't graze anymore. It's a very effective method of getting that predator out of the way. And that's also true. It's also, there's different endophytes that are like anti-feedants for insects. So the notion of using those kinds of predatory endophytic fungi that are protecting the plant as pesticides is also taking off.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's all.
Yeah, we got a couple questions we should probably feed into you now that people are asking. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, Elizabeth Bilodeau says, "Thank you so much for being an amazing woman, author, and microphile. I raise my glass to you. Cheers."
Cheers.
And I'm pretty sure she's raising her glass right now too. She loves your books. Ed May says Edge, which is an awesome book.
Oh, wow.
I like it because you can pick that up and just jump into the middle and read a section of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun to read about people sometimes than like bacteria.
I know. Well, and that's for people that read your book, Microphilia. Your books are very much about people, and there's some science wrapped around as the context. Yeah, well, that's what makes it so. I think I love your books, and I feel like I know you really better than I know you because I've read your books.
Yeah, I feel that way about myself sometimes.
Well, if you're ever confused, read your books. Yeah. Okay, let me keep going. A general question: how harmful are these fungal to human health? Do some plants need fungal to grow? So that was asked a few minutes back. I think they meant fungi.
So, you know, here that's actually a pretty cool question. I mean, like I'm thinking, so these fungi produce alkaloids that that can dissuade predators from eating them, right? And their interactions with people are on a spectrum. Like there's, I believe it's maybe in Montana. There's the sleepy grass campground. It's like a little valley where that's full of grass that's infected with this endophyte, and when your ponies eat them, they like boom, fall over and fall asleep for like 3 days or something. So there's like that kind of interactions, and then there's interactions that are really, really dangerous. So this is Claviceps purpurea is not an endophyte. It is a I don't think it's an endophyte of cereal crops. However, it's this, what the fungus does is it produces these like little sort of banana shaped little spikes on the grains of the cereal that are really just mycelium that's kind of, it's in a resting phase. It's like little sclerotia, they call them. And they're very, very small. They look like little black tips that you see them on the cereal grain. But if you make bread with Claviceps purpurea infected cereals, then you can develop ergotism. And ergotism is god awful. And if your animals eat grains that are infected with Claviceps purpurea, they will also get very sick. And there's two kinds. There's there is gangrenous erotism. I mean,
Ooh.
I love this. It's nothing so great as to talk about gross stuff, but gangrenous erotism, which causes the hoofs of the predator that causes gangrene on their hoofs and stuff, just like certain endophytes do in fescue grass. And also when you eat bread made from this Claviceps purpurea infected grain, then people's fingers, their extremities become gangrenous and fall off. It's called, in the medieval world, it's called St. Anthony's fire. You have this hot tingling. That's because there's a restriction of the blood vessels, which, when no blood going, then you get the gangrene. And the UN actually has a program to monitor the world supply of cereals because Claviceps purpurea is everywhere. I mean, you can find it all in the fields and stuff. It's just, in the wild, you have to be sure it doesn't get in the food supply. And so that's the gangrenous side of it. It's pretty gross. And then another strain of the same species causes something called convulsive ergotism. And convulsive ergotism is like a really, really, really bad acid trip. And indeed, LSD is synthesized from Claviceps purpurea, which you all probably.
Is that the Salem witch trial?
So that's a theory that the Salem witches were actually mass poisoning by ergot infected rye. It was a very wet year, that year of the witch trials, and it make you go crazy. And convulsive ergotism makes people go through these convulsions, and they twist their hands and bodies in weird ways. And if you look at drawings, like etchings of the symptoms of convulsive ergotism, they show hands and feet like this is what you're looking for. So you look possessed if you've got this disease.
Which one would you rather have if you had to have one of those? Which one is the worst?
I would go for convulsive ergotism all the time. In fact, any day, because gangrene, once you lose your thumb, or your finger, forget it. Finito. Yeah. Whereas convulsive ergotism, just a really bad trip for however long it lasts.
Assuming they don't hang you for being a witch.
Assuming, yeah, you don't crazy. Right. Yeah. So, and there was another thing. I mean, it happened periodically, I guess, associated with outbreaks of ergotism of where the fungus took over. Was proliferated in fields at different times during medieval years, really starting from the 14th century through the 17th century, and it caused something called this insane dancing, and so it was called the dancing plague. And people in villages would dance madly, like thousands of them for days at a time, because they're eating. Yeah, and it called it the dancing plague. There's a book about it. So, okay. So that was really a very effective way for that fungus to ensure its habitat was not disturbed. You do that once, you're not going to do it again.
So the answer is, can these be harmful to human health? And certain of them. Yeah. Totally, the answer is yes.
Well, the thing about endophytes and their poisonous, I don't know very much about them, although I do know how to find that out. So I wish I could put everybody on pause and go check. But their endophyte. There's another endophyte question. So maybe one of your listeners knows the answer, but do you think endophytes might have something to do with the flavors of foods? Yeah. Because we eat them all the time. When we're eating lettuce, we're eating endophytic fungi living between the cells. I mean, how responsible are they for the production of flavor?
Well, Ronald just raised his hand. I'd say, Ronald, if you have an answer, pop it in the chat. Let us know. I guess there's probably no way to really separate out food from its endophytes, so you could taste the lettuce without.
I guess the chemist, would be able to identify molecules that are associated with certain flavors and things. Sorry, my phone's going in. Turn it off.
You gonna answer that?
Nope, I'm gonna hang up.
Okay. So it sounds too like there's a lot of different species of endophytic fungi, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like the scientists are finding them everywhere they look.
Huh.
So, you know, the sky's the limit. There's actually a little bit of an endophytic, sorry, I'm going to turn this off. An endophytic gold rush going on, you know, where people are searching hard for endophytes that have potential for agricultural uses, but also for medicinal uses, like Taxol from the yew tree may actually be produced by an endophyte, right?
Oh, really? Yeah, that's a cancer treatment.
Yeah, very effective if you have breast cancer. So.
Beth offers up headache medication that Cafe Ergo has ergo in it, and she's allergic to it.
Oh, well, she's absolutely right. That ability to constrict blood vessels is what has made it also a medicine. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Albert Hofmann, who synthesized LSD, was poking around in ergot. They were looking for, you know, the active ingredient. But that constricting of the blood vessels supposedly helps people with migraines. I'm sorry that that one of our participants has an allergic reaction. That sucks. But also can help with postpartum bleeding, bringing on labor, all kinds of, there's a number of other uses that have traditional and current applications.
Okay. How about this one? Bryce has a question, and this is kind of a follow-up from last week with Trad. Trad was saying that and this is Bryce Scriber, that the beneficial bacteria and fungi was killed off to allow for GMO to take hold. So are these tests happening without the killing of step?
The tests meaning on endophytes?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So so beneficial bacteria, you know, so Trav was saying that
Monsanto types are removing the beneficial bacteria and the endophytic fungi from plants
to allow genetic modifications to take hold.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's so, you know, there's a real downside, of course, to doing that, because they provide all of these, you know, the ecological services. They give the plant the ability to survive the day, you know. But when you use glyphosate, it does cause a withdrawal of bacteria, of symbionts, you know, because certainly fungi, and I think that might have something to do with, you know, the fungi need they thrive on a range of species to connect with, the mycorrhizal fungi, for example. And without that range of species, because you've got like monocropping and everything dead, then they withdraw. There's just not enough, you know, there for them, not enough food for them. And
no habitat.
There's a lot of otherwise, you know, to be honest with you, nitrogen, when farmers dump nitrogen and phosphorus on their, you know, on synthetic fertilizers on their crops, the fungi, you know, people go, oh, well, it kills the fungi or causes the fungi to withdraw. But you have to think of it really, that what really goes on, you know, another way to look at it is that the plant doesn't give up. So, you know, plants, they attract mycorrhizal fungi, and they attract bacteria by providing exudates, you know, yummy sugars and fatty acids. They leak them out of their root tips, and it attracts the microbes to attach, and the trading starts. But the plants spend a lot of, they spend a lot of exudates. They spend a lot of money. They spend a lot of the products that they make as a result of photosynthesis attracting these microbial partners to do all kinds of important jobs, like, you know, helping them survive the day, get more nutrition, defense functions, communication, all that kind of stuff. But if they don't need the nitrogen, sorry, if they don't need the nitrogen because we're giving it to them, if they don't need the nitrogen, I'm sorry, my whole system is like shutting down.
Do you have a model train there that you do in your spare time? You like to do some model railroading? You can put your little hat on if you want.
I'm just going to turn off my phone. What happens is I have an elderly friend who keeps calling me, and he's got his phone, issues, and quite honestly, so do I. Turn off my phone right now. Okay, there we go. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
So anyway, think about it. If we give the plant nitrogen and phosphorus, and we put pesticides and fungicides on the, well, let's just not talk about fungicides. Let's say pesticides on the crops. Why does the plant need to give up any of its products of photosynthesis to attract symbiotic partners? So it doesn't. And that's what happens to the relationship. That's the fungi and bacteria, they decline in diversity in numbers. And it's like that thing I said, I sent you this weird picture. I guess it's the law of association segregation in ecology. I wrote down some laws. Anyway, the law of association segregation, what it says is that when you have a loss of species, you have in an environment, let's say the soil around a plant, you have a loss of species because the plant's not going to make friends with, was not going to recruit other microbes from the soil if it doesn't have to, because we're feeding it, we're force feeding it nitrogen and so on. Then the plant doesn't, so you end up with a loss of species diversity in the immediate environment. And when you have a loss of species diversity, they're less capable of providing these important ecological services. So you have ultimately this simplistic environment. And this is exactly what happens to our gut when we don't eat a variety of plants and feed a lot of different fiber fermenters in our gut. We end up with these simplified communities. Mm-hmm. Simplified community is less capable of providing evolutionary benefits to a host than a complex one. It's like the difference between, what is your gut like, or what is it like? Is it like an Iowa cornfield, or is it like the Amazon? What's going to survive the day better? So that's why I was, kind of saying earlier that the plant fungal relationship and the human bacteria relationship, and we have a relationship with more than bacteria, so I'm simplifying, but it's not dissimilar. It all follows the same rules of ecology, the same types of dependencies, defense, habitat, nutrition. It's the same story in a way, over and over again.
Sounds like we should move and talk more about us. We had a question or two more though. Let's do one more, just practical. How do they inoculate the plants or seeds with endophytes?
Thank you for asking that question, because it's so.
Brent asked that question, Westlake.
So great question. And you'd think, like, how do they do that? Well, it turns out that these endophytes are so gregarious that they are actually collected from, like, let's say the tomato plant example I used earlier. You can collect the endophytes from the mature grass living in 180-degree hot spring area, and you can transfer that endophytic fungus. I mean, it's the guy who told me about this. His name is Rusty Rodriguez. He's got a company called Adaptive Symbiotic Technologies. He's really was one of the early people in this. He said, we literally transfer the fungus. Okay, it's microscopic and they've got their tools, but we just transfer it onto the other plant where it colonizes. Mm-hmm. So that's how, you would be like potentially buying the stuff, but you can't rate it. You have to collect endophytes that have already adapted to that particular problem, like 180-degree growing heat. You can't just start a new culture. I mean, maybe trash. If anybody's going to figure it out, it'll be trash. But you can't, from what I understand, you can't start a new culture. You have to, the endophyte has to be in that situation. I'm guessing for the genes to turn on, to provide that service, and then you can apply it to the plants that you need to develop that stress tolerance. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, the way that plants get their endophytes is their legacy organisms. So when the seed is produced, it's covered in its little baby microbiome. It's like the mom plant gives the seed everything it needs to get started. And when that seed germinates, the microbes on it, the bacteria and the fungi primarily, but there's others, archaea and so on, but primarily bacteria and fungi, once that seed germinates, those microbes, they spread out and diversify into different parts of the plant. Some go into the roots, and then some go into the earth around the roots, where they will actually, there's bacteria who will actually fan out into the surrounding soil and kill competing plants. I mean, it's like a little mercenary comes with the seed. Then there's some that will move into between the cells, and then others that will be on top of the leaves. So there's this complete growth of a microbiome that is a gift, like mom's first gift. Same for us, right? When a woman has a baby, that baby travels through the birth canal and she picks up her first microbiome. She picks up her first microbiome, and then in short order, those microbes start to diversify. Some move under her arm, some down into her gut, all over her body, where they will provide an array of services up to a certain point in life. Once that baby starts taking in food, that's how baby gets her kind of mature microbiome. That's acquired from the environment.
Can you talk about microbiome?
Huh?
Let's talk about microbiome.
Yeah, we are.
Like, I know. It just, you started with that word.
I mean, what is it?
Yeah,
Is that what
like,
you're asking?
like what is
What's
it?
a microbiome?
Yeah.
So, like, you just think of a regular biome. Might be like, let's say a biome would be the temperate rainforest, right, where you're going soon. Well, a microbiome is the equivalent on a microscopic scale. So a microbiome is a defined community with that of diverse organisms, microscopic organisms that follow basic rules of ecology. They function like ecologies, right? The rules of ecology, like, whoever gets the most food increases the most. The ecological balance matters. When I went back to school, they tell us this in the beginning of the ecology section. I've studied biology for a little while, and they told us the story about the wolves of Central Park. Do you know this story, you guys?
No.
What happened? Like in the 1920s, the wolves of Central Park, not Central Park, sorry, Yellowstone Park. The wolves of Central Park.
Oh. Look, that makes more sense.
They wear ties. Corporations. No, the wolves of Yellowstone Park, right? This story, In the 1920s, the wolves were attacking all the local ranchers' sheep. The ranchers complained. They said, get the wolves out. Government gets rid of the wolves. The elk populations increase. They start hanging around the stream banks. They erode the stream banks. They eat all the willow. No willow, so the beavers can't build dams. No beaver dams. The rivers aren't slowed down, so then there's no ducks and no trout. Anyway, ecological disaster. In the 90s, some ecologists said, let's just put a few wolves back in. And in short order, The wolves kept the elk on the hoof. They ate here and there instead of concentrating on the banks of the streams. The willow came back, the beaver came back, the beaver slowed down the streams, the duck came back, ecological balance was restored. So the same thing happens in our gut. It's not like the elk are bad, right? They're just bad for in the wrong numbers for their environment, for their ecosystem. So the same thing goes for us. It's not like we have bad bacteria and good bacteria. It's more like we have the wrong population numbers in the community that creates our microbiome, like the biome, the ecology, the ecosystem. Imagine your gut is like Yellowstone Park. And if you've got overgrowths of elk in there, then you're going to suffer from dysbiosis, gut ill health, unbalanced gut, problems pooping, and so on. Does that help?
We're going to talk about farting tonight.
You're going to do some what?
Are we going to talk about farting tonight?
I'm much more interested in pooping,
Okay.
but we can
Fair
talk.
enough.
I know much less about farting. That's more a mechanical thing. That's for, engineers.
So when humans are born, are you saying that they're essentially created with the ideal microbiome, and then as time goes on,
Good question.
we mess things up? How do we?
Very good question. So when a baby's born, well, here's one thing that's, all right, so what nature does is women have all kinds of different vaginomes, as they call them. Like we all have, we're all human women have basically the same species, but, little different population numbers within those species, right? So some people might have more beaver, some people might have more ducks, whatever. But the vaginome, when we get pregnant, all women's vaginomes tend to be dominated by certain bacterial species. And those species are bacteria that are key to engineering what is evolved to become a healthy gut microbiome for baby. So even though, Kristen, you and I have different vaginomes, when we're pregnant, they're pretty similar because babies need those microbes. But if the baby's not born vaginally, what microbes are they going to get? Well, there's some caveats to that, but in general, they're going to get the harmless skin bacteria that are floating around in the surgical arena, right? Or, but although it's interesting that a woman who gets pregnant, who goes into labor and then has a C-section, baby still has the microbiome, picks up the microbiome. So the thing is, you pick it up going through the vaginome, definitely that happens, but there might be more to the story. There's a lot that's kind of being uncovered. But once baby has that microbiome, things can get screwed up if, like what happened to my daughter is that we both developed a strep infection in the hospital while I was in labor, and we had high fevers. So they put us on antibiotics. And those antibiotics, what do? They kill bacteria. So her initial microbiome was degraded by having to take antibiotics early on. And you see over and over again, preemie babies, babies that have had to deal with a lot of antibiotics early on will have this dysbiosis or unwell living, unbalanced life is what that means, later in life. Problems like with allergies and asthma and kind of immune type problems. It's really wild. So yeah.
On that note, we have a chat question. Is sperm a bacterium?
No, sperm is not a bacterium. Sperm is genetic information with a little mitochondria power pack to get those sperm where they go. And the reason why you don't have, why mitochondria don't exist in once in the egg, fertilized egg, you heard about mitochondrial DNA from the mother, matriarchal DNA. Anyway, that's because the sperm has its little bit of mitochondria that gives it enough ATP, enough energy just to find where it wants to go, and then it drops that power pack off just the way the space shuttle drops off its power pack, and then hopefully it hits its target, and that's it. No, it's human. It's little globules of it's DNA with attitude. With intent. Yeah, it's not bacteria, but there's a lot of bacteria, in human bodies, and some of it, is pretty gross. Like, there's the things that make smells on you is bacterial. I mean, bad breath is bacteria. It's not a sour stomach. It's not you. You didn't inherit it. All that stuff is just wives' tales. The truth is that you've got like lots of bacteria in your mouth, lots of different critters. This is a microbiome with a lot of diversity, and like I just added to the diversity, right? There's a lot in there. So the thing is, some of them are anaerobic, like don't use oxygen, like those like archaea that I talked about before, those like ancient critters before the world was oxygenated. Anyway, some of them are anaerobic. They don't like oxygen, and some of them are aerobic. They like oxygen. So when there's lots of oxygen, like right now, all the aerobic bacteria that like oxygen, they're living well. They're increasing, they're dividing, they're eating whatever they're eating in my mouth, and all is good. They're using the oxygen as their energy source to divide. When I'm asleep, my mouth is closed. My aerobic bacteria, they start to decline because they need oxygen, so they start to die off. My anaerobic bacteria, the ones that don't like oxygen, they start to grow. They increase in numbers, and they have this really stinky side effect. So when you open your mouth, what you're doing is it's anaerobic bacteria that have had a chance to proliferate because of circumstances, because this microbiome's environment changed.
So this idea of a microbiome in our body, there's lots of microbiomes, different parts of our body, our ears, our eyes, or our scalp, our nose.
Every orifice, and the bit in our stomach and in our upper GI, but the big location is our lower GI, our colon. There are a shitload of bacteria in the colon. So, and they do important jobs.
It sounds like, the big deal is equilibrium, right? You want to keep your microbiome in some sort of equilibrium. And if you get to a point in any of those areas where it gets out of equilibrium, then you have problems.
You feel sick.
Right.
And the same thing. So what works on the scale of your tummy also works on the scale of the forest, also works on the scale of the planet. A microbiome is still a biome.
Right.
It's just a part of that sphere of life that is beyond our ability to see. Whose problem is that? That's ours.
So if we experience, whether it's ourselves or the planet or whatever, a disequilibrium in our gut, for example, which is probably one of the most common things humans suffer from, how do we diagnose what's going on in there and set ourselves back to a state of happy bacteria?
So it's, again, it's not so much who's in there, unless you've got a pathogen that's making you sick. All right, that could happen. But it's not so much who's in there as who's in there in what numbers.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't the elk that fucked up Yellowstone Park. It was the number of elk.
Right.
It was the population. So when we talk about gut health, or at least how these communities are composed, it's really it's a game of population ratios. So you want to, ideally, I guess, is increase certain populations that you need in high numbers and decrease populations that are healthier for you in lower numbers. So where do we go from there? Well, now, one of the problems is that the doctors don't know what a baseline healthy human microbiome is composed of. That would be great to know, but
why is that so difficult?
Well, because there's like trillions of them in there, and because there are all these different species, and because there is environmental factors like what you eat and where you live that impact what constitutes a healthy microbiome, because a microbiome is ultimately an adapted organism. It's an adapted organ. Imagine your microbial symbionts in your tummy is adapting to where you live. It's why when you go to Mexico, you get in trouble, but maybe a Mexican doesn't. Well, actually, I think they do too now, but let me give you another example.
What about when you're at altitude or not? I mean, could something like that simple as that affect it?
Yeah, that's a curious question. That would be another, like, hit the pause button and see what I could find. But think of it this way, like in a Western gut, you know what? You could show a picture. You see that picture of my dad of those two color wheels?
Yeah, let me show that here. Give me
That one.
That's your dad?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, there he is. Okay, that's my dad. He's 93 years old. Makes his own wine, grows his own vegetables, does his own cooking. He's tough like an old glove. He's gonna live fucking forever, it looks like. Anyway,
we're comparing you to him. It's hard to read. What are we looking at?
All right, I'm gonna explain. He's always bragging about his poops, right? He says they're fantastic. Always bragging about them. So when I said, well, let's test your poop and see who lives there, he was thrilled. It was like a test that he knew he was going to ace.
Was that like your Christmas gift for him last year?
I was like, I just need a little bit on the end of the Q-tip, Dad. Oh, no. He had to really give me a supply. He was pretty proud of himself. Anyway, we did this test where you send in a little fecal sample to find out what microbes are present in your colon at the time. But the thing is, you have to remember that this is just like a snapshot, because there's critters that you're taking in and they're passing through, and on the way out, it's a little bit like taking a picture of the crowd in Times Square and trying to determine who lives there all the time from that picture. It can be kind of difficult. That said, Edward has this incredible diet. He's been doing it forever. Very impressive. Me, I drink wine, I eat like French baguettes, and I don't know. My diet's pretty good, but not incredible. Not like I thought his was. And it turns out we're quite similar. Both of us are. This is on a phylum level, which is really, really, when you're talking about taxonomy, phylum's pretty wide, pretty big. Like phylum for animals would be like you would be in the same phylum as like a sea squirt, right? It's like a big group. It encompasses a lot of critters.
I'd be at the top of it though, just to be clear.
Well, kind of, no, but still. So anyway, so what you're looking at here is the firmicutes are dominant, and firmicutes are, so it's phylum level, right? It's really general. We're not even down to genus here, but they are mostly involved, at least if we took this down to genus, we'd see they're mostly involved with breaking down cereals. So that would be like bread and pasta and stuff like that, and vegetables. And then the others, these bacteriophages here, I can hardly read it.
It's hard to read.
Yeah, it's hard to read.
Sorry about that. Are break down meats. Pretty much a similar diet even though we might eat differently. Now, if you were going to compare that breakdown of firmicutes is going to be pretty similar to anyone in the West, in the industrialized West. You're not going to start seeing real diversity and difference in the makeups of microbiomes unless you start looking at the gut microbiomes of people, hunter-gatherer type people, or if you were looking at the microbiomes of people living in other extremely different environments, say the Inuits, how are they getting their fiber fermenters? Well, from fermented walrus milk and stuff. So, the point that I'm trying to make here is that there's not enough, change has to have to change your microbiome requires huge changes beyond just like eating more kale, because it's a reflection of your biome, where you live, the kind of food that you have access to. And so in the industrialized West, we have certain foods that we all eat. So basically my microbiome and your microbiome is going to be pretty similar to the microbiome of the Prime Minister of France. Vegan might have a different, have a lot more fiber fermenters. Those are the firmicutes that are coming from plant-based foods, but they're going to have a lot of those those fermenters, those ones that ferment cereals and stuff too. So so the notion that you can change your microbiome, you'd have to change your biome, because we're like a mesobiome. We're just between, two biomes, or we're inside a bigger one and then there's a smaller one in us. It's a very, very hard thing to change. However, if you have an extreme diet, like you eat hamburgers every day, then what you'll do is you'll undermine the population numbers in your guts enough to cause troubles that can lead to things like leaky gut. And we can talk about that a little bit if you want to get granular. No.
Not leaky gut.
Yeah, but it's one of the things that happens to people if you just eat hamburgers and don't eat enough fiber, then the fiber fermenters don't increase in enough population numbers, and you need them in large population numbers living on the interior of your colon, because they protect your colon wall from penetration by pathogens. Your colon wall is only one cell thick. So, you need the help of all those bacteria and the mucus they produce and all that stuff.
One cell thick.
Yeah, think about it. One cell thick, but it's corrugated. So we're talking about your colon right now, where most of your bacteria are, and the cell wall is corrugated. So there's actually a lot of real estate, but it's condensed. And then sitting on top of that are all these bacteria, a diversity of bacteria, but you need a lot of fiber fermenting bacteria sitting on top of that. When you eat I don't know, dandelion greens, we're animals, we eat meat. That fiber is going to make its way down to the colon, where your bacteria are going to disassemble it and make bioavailable the vitamins and minerals and stuff that are in that dandelion. And then they increase in numbers, and their presence agitates the colon wall and produces mucus. So you have this nice layer of mucus that protects the inside of the colon wall. But if you eat nothing but hamburgers and those fiber fermenters decline in numbers, you end up with these patches, these like kind of bald patches where you've got scant fiber fermenters living on the interior of your colon wall, not producing, and they don't stimulate the cells to produce mucus. So you have these bald spots, and then if there's little junctions between the cells, which can happen for a lot of reasons, then all kinds of shit can pass through into your bloodstream, and before you know it, you're developing, and you're in constant state of inflammation because your body's producing immune response to these molecules that have passed through your gut and into your bloodstream. That's what leaky gut is. A lot of people have that problem. You got to feed your fiber fermenters. That's the way to move away from that. And that's ecology.
I think we want to ask about the probiotics and prebiotics, but we do have a question or two kind of on this. Maybe we should ask their questions before we do that. Bryce says, asked about, he got his question answered, I'm sorry. So Bryce asked a question and then said he got it answered, so we're good there. How different is human and animal feed on plants?
I don't know what he means
I'm
by
not
that.
sure. We might skip that one. Beth says, so in essence, pick more mushrooms to maintain the equilibrium of the forest, correct?
Right. When you think about picking, you know, there's a controversy in that I'm sure you guys are super aware of in the mushroom world about how much damage is done by picking. Is there such a thing as overpicking mushrooms? And I think, again, that's totally a reflection of habitat. If you pick every mushroom in the habitat, that's a problem. But if you're hunting in, you know, thousands upon thousands of forest land, the chances that you're going to be picking every mushroom is pretty small, and so your impact is going to be minimal. It's really like, what impact does the hunter have on the ecosystem, that mushroom plant ecosystem? It's totally based on the size, you know, the parameters of the ecosystem itself. At what point does it end? You know, yeah. But in general, picking mushrooms doesn't hurt anything. It just doesn't help anything.
Well, let's go to probiotics. What the heck
I
are
have
those?
to say, mushrooms are a great source of fiber to feed your fiber fermenters, because their cell walls are made of chitin, that tough stuff that's like the same kind of sugary substance that shrimp shells are made out of. And we don't do a good job digesting it up here. Let me stand up for a demonstration. Not so good up here, but very good down in the colon. I mean, all those fiber fermenting bacteria break down those mushrooms and increase in number, and then supply the various nutrients in it to you know, to our bodies. But you want to talk about probiotics and prebiotics?
Yeah, like what are those?
Mushrooms are prebiotics. Mushrooms are prebiotics. They are food for bacteria. So biotic would be life, right? Biotic. So prebiotics is food for life. So that would be food for bacteria. Prebiotics are as an apple. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, and that's because it helps those fiber fermenters in your gut wall, you know, protecting your gut wall, helps them stay there. An apple is a prebiotic. You can also buy prebiotics in the store. They can be cheap or they can be expensive. If you look on the label on the back, it says fiber. That's prebiotic is bacteria food. Probiotic is live bacteria.
Live bacteria, yeah.
Right. So we all have resident bacteria that we that set up shop in us and stay put. You know, or if they increase and some of them die and then they're out, but you know, they are resident bacteria, species that are residents. And then we have species that are transient. They come in and they go out. We need to, you know, they come in, they pass, they drop off some helpful molecules, they do a few jobs, and then they come out the other end. Those are probiotics. You need your probiotic bacteria. Hopefully you get them from food, but you can't really have a problem and eat a few and then take some probiotics and then stop taking them and think the problem is going to go away, because they don't stay there. They are just passing through. So a probiotics is a continual relationship. You want to benefit from them, you got to keep them coming in. And the way to do that is through food.
You know, you've studied microbiology. Do you take probiotics or prebiotics? I mean, I guess you eat every day, so those are prebiotics.
Right. So I don't buy that stuff, because the way nature wants us to do it is get it from our food. So I eat a lot of fiber, and that's my prebiotic. Like I eat lots of green vegetables. And then for my probiotics, I eat fermented foods, and I just fold it into my daily life. It's just part of my diet.
Why fermented?
It's not
food?
just when I have a hot dog that I have sauerkraut.
Active bacteria.
Because
Yeah.
those probiotics are full of, and I make my own because there's nothing as stupid easy as making yogurt or sauerkraut or kimchi. Those are easy. The thing that ferments them is the type of bacteria that are helpful in your body. So when you make your own yogurt and you consume that yogurt on a regular basis, then you are constantly supplying your body with those microbes, those bacteria, but also there's important fungi too.
Do you want to eat all of that? Like when you talk about fermented foods and yogurt, is that like, oh, I'm going to have some fermented food and yogurt today? Do they bring different things to you?
No, they don't. And it's, they're both the same type of bacteria, and that ferments yogurt and sauerkraut, and they are, there's different species, of course, lots of them, but I fold those kind of fermented foods into my life as a regular practice, and it keeps me, pooping happily. The whole plumbing thing is like good, but it's that, and then keeping up my fiber fermenters in my gut, so that I don't have any of this horrible problem of inflammation. Because when you have holes, when you have gaps in your gut wall, and think of all the stuff that's in your colon. There's a lot of shit in there, and I mean that in every sense of the word. And that those molecules can pass through. They get in your bloodstream. Your immune system, which is patrolling your colon all the time, encounters these molecules in the bloodstream, freaks out, sets up an inflammatory response. And then if that's happening all the time, that's how people get these, chronic diseases. Obesity is related to this. Diabetes. It's amazing how, but it's over a lifetime of letting this happen to your body.
Yeah. Mayumi has a question. We've got a few in here. Julie Schreiber says hello from Facebook.
Hi, Julie. Julie is an incredible chef. In Napa Valley and winemaker. You guys all should go check out Myco Ventures when you're in the San Francisco area. She's fantastic.
We did a webinar with her like 2 weeks ago on all we talked about were candy caps. It was fascinating.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she knows how to cook them too.
Yeah, she does. That's for sure. Hi, Julie.
Amazing mushroom.
Brooke Moyer says hi. Barbara Lawrence asked if there's a way to see the beginning of the interview. She came in late. Yeah, Barbara, we're going to post it up on Facebook, YouTube afterwards. So it'll be there tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. Beth asked, what about kefir?
Same thing.
It's like
Same
drinking
thing.
yogurt. Okay.
Yeah, same thing. These foods, they benefit us if they are folded into our diet. It's not like this whole notion that, I feel run down, so I'm going to go on I'm going to go on probiotics for, 4 days and then I'm done. It's not how it works. Those are organisms whose constant presence is a part of our well-being. So, and to take pills all the time, that's just bullshit. It's expensive. And make your own yogurt or make your own sauerkraut. There's something for every diet.
Yeah, you just got to have the wolf in your diet. You don't have to.
You
do
just
anything special.
add some more. And in the case of probiotics, you're adding beaver. Or you're adding willow, you're adding something to the ecosystem that it needs present all the time.
Okay.
If it was lacking, then eventually, if you keep doing that, you'll get back into balance. But I have to really tell people these, we're limited by our biome. we cannot make a fundamental change in our microbiome and still live in the industrialized West. It's just an impractical goal. I mean, you can, if you go really extreme, yeah, you can make changes, but we're really talking about very subtle changes, the difference between maybe having good poops and having kind of poops, yeah, not a whole lot of.
Mm-hmm.
So Mayumi wants to know, can we overdo it? Can you consume too many probiotics?
And that's Mayumi asked that question since she makes a lot of fermented foods.
Yeah,
She's got a kimchi and kefir and kombucha.
you know, I don't know that. I mean, I think that in the case, I think that you can, but I'm trying to remember, I think there is one study that I read that suggested that too many probiotics would cause dysbiosis in the gut, but I think that was under like a medical application where it was, I mean, unless the listener, Naomi was her name?
Mayumi.
Yep.
Unless you're like, eating yogurt, think of it this way. If you were eating nothing but yogurt and you had some gastro problems, you're going to probably say to yourself, I'm just eating too much yogurt. Well, the fact is you're maybe putting in too much of certain species into your body. That's the unseen aspect of what you already know. So that's what we're kind of talking about, is the unseen explanation behind things that you already know. If you're if your body feels good, then you're not eating too much. But there is a study, I think, that had to do with infants and diarrhea. They can be newborns can be very young babies can be given probiotics to help them with diarrhea. There's some studies in that, but it has to be done right. At least according to
his website. Forget my.
Mayumi, I don't know. Mayumi, put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat. Mayumi makes. We did a webinar with her a couple weeks ago, and she does koji fermentation.
No, that's even.
Oh my gosh! I'm sitting
Mayumi
here.
makes beautiful silk
does.
scarves.
Talk about fermented food, and I just clicked into that. Sorry, Mayumi. Duh. Yeah, she makes beautiful scarves.
Yes.
We have one of her scarves.
Yes.
Two.
No one.
Mayumix.com.
Yes.
Thank you.
Elena, who you were thinking of, is sharedcultures.com or
Shared
shared-cultures.com. She's awesome too.
I mean, it would be so great if you're not into making stuff like this for yourself, because you need the probiotics. It's good. You have to, you got to fold them into your diet. If you're not into making the stuff yourself,
the dogs. Sorry.
If you're not into making it yourself, you want to trade with somebody. I mean, that's what I do. You trade with somebody that makes it that that makes something that you love, and you trade for what you do. I mean, we create these sort of Venn diagrams of personal ecosystems that can actually expand, your access to really very high grade foods that will feed this microbiome. And the more you feed, the more succeeds.
Awesome. Super cool.
What else do we have on our? What's the pre versus the pro?
I don't know. We've gone over so much.
I had another.
We could take a pause to see if anyone has questions at the moment.
I think there's another question back there. Scroll down. Yeah, here's one from Ethan. Does alcohol, beer or wine affect the microbiome?
There's been some studies about that, but I can't remember. If it was like really good news, I think I would remember.
Yeah.
But they don't, even though they're fermented foods, they don't provide probiotics. So you have to take them out of that category. Another way to think about probiotics is like when you compost when you compost your garden, you are, it's like you're giving your garden probiotics, because your compost is full of microbes. The microbes go into the garden and they distribute throughout the garden, throughout, all around the roots of the plants, providing different ecological services, right, that help that plant be healthier, including, in the case of fungi, providing micronutrients. I mean, plants, make their own food, but not all of it. They need phosphorus, they need nitrogen. They got to get that from somewhere, and it's their symbiotic partners that provide it, bacteria and fungi. And so if you, so compost is like a probiotic for the garden, and your table scraps are like a prebiotic for the compost. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the same thing goes with the foods we eat. I mean, again, same story over and over. It's like nature, there is one gigantic story and a zillion versions of it.
Yeah.
In the visual world, in the seen world, and the unseen world.
Okay,
It's
well,
really a glorious.
Carla has a good question about, let's call it unseen world and the gut biome. What about emotional and physical stress, and how does that affect
Your
the
gut microbiome.
Yeah, I can. There's been some studies. They're kind of weird. I haven't really seen a lot of studies on this, but one that I found pretty compelling was what is it called? When you get really, I'm sorry?
Cortisol?
Cortisol. Cortisol and similar molecule is, what are cortisols? I can't remember if they're hormones or not, but they, what they do is they can affect the, I'm trying to remember, it does affect populations in the gut, of bacteria in the gut. It can cause the increase of some and the decrease of others, which have, I can't remember that story exactly, which is too bad because I wrote about it in Microbia. But yes, stress can affect your microbiome to such an end as to compromise your immune system so that you could potentially get a cold, which is why kids who are stressed out when they have to do exams get colds really easily. And it's actually those microbes in their guts that play roles in protecting and supporting their immune system and their gut wall that are compromised by those by cortisol and molecules that are similar.
Yeah,
So,
Beth and Carla say cortisol is a steroid hormone.
Yeah.
Corticosteroids.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it does. But the studies I read were, they kind of didn't address like the question you want the answer to, which is, if I'm stressed out, is this going to cause,
are you going to stop pooping?
Am I going to get leaky gut syndrome? Instead, it looks more at the interaction between the hormone and the bacteria. That relationship. The studies I've read was more about that particular relationship. Look, there's a million. It's like taking apart the ecosystem of the gut and all the factors that affect population ratios in the gut is this humongous job, and information is just coming in little bits and pieces. And so trying to put it all together, some overall generalizations. I mean, I think we're getting there, but it's, this is new science.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the microbiome was even coined in like the 70s or something.
Yeah.
Is not even, I mean, I'm older than the word.
It's certainly a catchphrase and I feel like if I'm hearing you correctly. I mean, is all this stuff that we hear about the gut microbiome and you know, there's a million people trying to sell you this, that, and the other thing. Is it all a bunch of BS? I mean, I feel like I'm hearing you say, you know, look to your food. You can't really change your biome. You know, you can change it a little bit here, but overall, if you're putting in these healthy bacteria through your food and you're cognizant of doing that on a regular
And you're
basis.
having a variety of vegetables because you want to support your fiber fermenters. Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. You know, I mean, but it's so complex. For example, you know, if you have, if you're worried that you've got, you know, like you have bad acid indigestion and you're worried that you might have holes, you know, in your stomach. What's that called again? I'm forgetting, you know.
Yeah. I
And
know
we're
what you're talking
like
about.
losing it right now because it's like, you don't hear about it anymore.
Ulcers.
Ulcers. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and you know, you think, oh my God, I've got an ulcer. So you go to get your, like, you know, you go to the gastroenterologist, and what the first thing they do is check to see if there's a certain bacteria that's present in your stomach because it causes ulcers in older people. And then they give you the antibiotic and boom, you're done. Well, it turns out that that particular bacteria that causes ulcers in older people, when you're young, they provide important molecules that build hormones that are necessary for mitigating, for moderating appetite. So if you don't have them, you could get all screwed up and end up with obesity when you're young. But if you do have them when you're old, they can cause disease. So this bacteria in your gut is actually its benefits is on a spectrum. So if you want to think about how to use bacteria for human health, you could do something like say, well, let's apply this bacteria when people are young and it helps them develop good eating habits. And then we kill it off when you're old before it gets into the stage where it causes ulcers. So you have to think that remember that on an unseen level, microbes also have a spectrum of effects that because they have their own lifespan, their own, you know, arc, and that arc can affect the host in different ways. So it's not just the species, but it's how what point in the species life it is, or what point in the host's life the species is resident. You know, it's like, it's a shit show, but it's life.
Well, there's a therapy around that too, aren't there, where they transfer the biome from one person to another?
Yeah, fecal transplants. Oh yeah, they're great. And in fact, there's been some other tests. I mean, my husband and I did it once where we tried a nose transplant for a stuffy nose to try to move healthy microbiome, you know, from a nose that didn't have the virus to one that did. And it didn't really work, but we didn't sterilize our noses first and all that. But like in a fecal transplant, the way that works, this is so like totally cool. So you've got like a dysbiotic gut, right? And not enough fiber fermenters, for example, or you've killed off because of constant antibiotics, you've decreased your number of species in your gut, because you know how antibiotics work. They don't kill specific species, they kill characteristics in species. So it can be, you know, so if the characteristic is very wide, they can kill a lot of different species. You have a reduction of diversity in your gut. When you have a reduction of diversity in your gut, that allows, and numbers that can allow for other species to increase in numbers, right? So what happens to people when they get something called Clostridium Difficile, it is a terrible gut infection that's common for people who have taken lots and lots of antibiotics. The Clostridium is immune to the antibiotics. It has something called an endospore form where it's like in a little shell, so it's protected. All the other critters are killed, or a whole bunch of other critters are killed in the gut, and it wakes up and it starts to proliferate, and it causes it's disgusting what it does to your body, and you have chronic diarrhea, and it makes you really, really sick. Well, turns out that something like 90% of people who suffer from this terrible bacterial infection of their gut can get well if they have a fecal transplant. So they get this fecal material, and there's companies that produce it. They have like healthy donors that are well vetted. They've got like code names like Winnie the Pooh and Vladimir Putin. And they get that fecal material and they water it down with sterile water, and then they inject it like a turkey baster. It's actually more like a, you know, those water picks? It's like a water pick in the anus. And they just spray this fecal matter in, and
What do they do?
they just spray, yeah, they just
High speed
they spray it in, and then the microbes, these bacteria that are from a healthy donor, they pretty much push out the C. diff. They take over. They dominate the C. diff in the colon, and so people get well. But the question is, like, you know, I mean, I know a doctor on the Upper East Side who does it, but nobody knows like why it works, which is why your doctor's not going to immediately offer that to you. So why does it work? Well, it's a microbiome. So let's talk ecology. That's where you're going to find the answer, I think. So you can think about it this way. Does it work because you've introduced an evolutionary partner that is better suited to the body, and so is able to set up shop much more easily and then proliferate and outnumber and dominate the C. diff that's causing the trouble? Well, maybe. Maybe it is, but there was a study done, a small study, but it was really interesting. What these scientists did is they took the fecal matter and they took all the bacteria out. They put it through a sieve. The only thing left was some molecules, just the byproduct of the bacteria's metabolism, like the bacteria poop, and viruses were in there. And they sprayed that into the butt of the patient who had the C. diff, and it worked. So why would it work? Because the bacteria weren't present. The microbiome had just been reduced down to viruses and some stray molecules. Well, it turns out maybe it's because they introduced a predator, because viruses, called bacteriophages, are the main predators of bacteria. So they introduced a wolf. Mm-hmm. And that's what made it work. Yeah, pretty cool, right? So anyway.
They didn't kill the elk, they introduced the wolf.
Right. You got it. That's the way to think about all this stuff. You know, if you want to see the unseen world, just study ecology, because it follows the same rules, the same principles. Yeah.
So, gosh, we have some crazy, complicated questions, I feel like. We have Ronald, who is telling us that he had ulcers starting at age 11. And finally was cured with surgery at 18. He was a preemie and had lived overseas at age 9 and 10. Had the test for Helicobacter and it was negative, but have not ever had the antibody test because he, for cost reasons. And today was the first time he had ever heard of the vaginal biome. So super grateful for that. And then Frederick, I don't even understand this one, but excrete deposit around your anus. My question is what the stomach doesn't, or something as waste is out, but little deposits that are not clean, does it transmit bacteria to the cells around the anus?
Oh, okay. So, the thing that's important to remember about poop, and let me just preface this. I'm like a writer. I love to read this stuff. I read scientific papers, but I'm not an MD. And so I'm just kind of reporting what I read because I'm obsessed with the subject. But my experience and my insight kind of is limited, obviously, to what I've read. That said, poop is mainly dead bacteria. So don't worry about it. You got a little bit of poop left, I wouldn't worry about it. But, the Italians are like, don't understand why we use toilet paper. They're like, get a bidet, wash, just wash. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. There are areas where there's a lot of concentration of living bacteria inside your colon that are associated with colon cancer and things like that. Those bacteria those species are associated with bacteria that break down fats. So if you're eating a lot of meat, then those bacteria species increase, and they are associated with colon cancer. And I don't think they cause it. I cannot remember offhand, but their association is one that suggests you do not want to feed those bacteria. You do so to your own physical detriment. I mean, look, the bottom line is just eat lots of vegetables and make your own, or trade with a homemade, or buy good quality probiotic food, fermented foods. And there's so much variation. It's so cool the way it works. Like, I can't break down seaweed, right? Raw seaweed, but there's Japanese populations that can. Because what they did is those populations were eating seaweed that they gathered, and they were eating the raw seaweed, and the raw seaweed had on it bacteria that break down the seaweed. They're saprobic, just like oyster mushrooms are saprobic, they break down wood. So this is bacteria that breaks down seaweed. They ingested the saprobic bacteria along with the seaweed, and then in their gut, those saprobic bacteria that made it down there, they shared genes with resident bacteria in that Japanese population's gut. And then the resident bacteria thereafter acquired the ability to break down seaweed. And that ability was passed from generation to generation. And that's why Japanese people can get nutrition from seaweed, but
What if you had a fecal
from New York City cannot.
from one of those? What if you had a fecal transplant from one of those Japanese people?
Good question. I don't know.
That might have been a rhetorical question.
I don't know. I'm just saying,
Sure.
would that work right away? Or
Wouldn't that be great? It's like, I can't, I'm going to Japan. Set me up so I can.
Good news. I have good news for you. Mayumi offered just now. She said, I can give you mine.
Thanks,
So
Mayumi.
we can pass you her mailing address.
And see if I can, if we can digest seaweed. But it's really, but the real point of the story is that your biome, you are a reflection of of how you have adapted to your biome. Because, how do the Inuits get fiber if, which they need to build up the mucus layer that keeps their gut wall healthy, when there's like nothing in, the Bering Strait, there's nothing green up there. Well, they get it from another source, from fiber from fermented.
Not a genetic. There's not a genetic cause behind the seaweed digestion. It's a environmental factor, really, isn't it?
No, here it is. Think of it this way. Oh, this is so cool. It is genetic. It's just not your genes. It's the genes of the bacteria that do the job on your behalf. You're the host.
Mm-hmm.
You are the biome for them. You're the environment for them. You provide what they have to work with. So the Japanese population said, you can have, we're either, those of us that are going to survive are the ones that are going to develop the ability to get nutrition from seaweed.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is if there's a nuclear war and the only thing available to eat is cockroaches, those people who can get nutrition from cockroaches, either on their own or by means of by means of a symbiont are the ones that are going to survive the day. That's evolution. Environment selects. Everything is everywhere, but the environment selects. And you are the environment for your microbiome. Same thing with your scalp. You know, you wash your hair, you change the environment, so your microbes change too.
I think we've gotten the questions answered. I think we're wrapping up here. There was one, just, I think related one. Kombucha would fall under, that would be a fermented
Yeah, kombucha
as well.
Yeah, the thing about kombucha though, it's a little tricky because the kombucha has it has other fermenters present, and you know, kombucha's tricky. It has other fermenters present that it can easily become alcoholic, which undermines the probiotic, right? The livingness of the thing, and the viability of the bacteria. And it is also, because it's a mix of fungi and bacteria, the probiotics you're getting are a mix of fungi and bacteria. So I know a lot of people are into kombucha. It's been popular for a really long time. It's been trendy on and off for like 500 years. But it wouldn't be my go-to probiotic source, but you know, what do I know? I mean,
No.
Just eating meat.
what?
Better than just eating hamburger.
Well, yeah. Unless you were involved, your microbiome was adapted to an environment where you got everything those bacteria needed in a meat-based diet, like the Inuits.
Which,
So here's a fun kind of maybe wrap up question that
Okay, good. Because I'm getting starving.
is
I'm getting straight, it's almost 9. I mean, almost 10.
Microbiologist in you. Bryce Scriber wants to know, do masks help?
I can't hear you.
Can't hear us anymore? Trent, did you mute us?
Oh, there we go. Now I hear you.
Okay. So, maybe that was the.
no, it wasn't.
So Bryce Scriber wants to know, do the masks help?
The masks. Yeah, of course they do. You got to do the masks, man. I mean, I'm telling you, New York City is like, it was so incredibly heartbreaking when we were having, 1,000 people a day dying. I mean, sirens going all the time. It was like, these big trucks with all these corpses. I mean, it was heartbreaking, and it was real. And we have brought down, on not just in the city, but statewide, we have something like 50 new cases. I'm not talking about deaths. We brought it way down. And we brought it down by staying home, except for when you have to go to the store, and wearing masks and washing your hands, because viruses are not living, right? They're like bikes. When you wash their hands, it disassembles the bike and it can't ride anymore, So yeah, that's the way to get rid of that's the way to avoid the virus. Bring down the population numbers. It's all ecology. Bring down population numbers, and it decreases the chances of you getting infection. And we've done it here, except now with protests and things, we're probably going to see an outbreak again in another few weeks. I think we could.
All right. Well, gosh, thank you.
That was fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fun. Good.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to maybe seeing you around this summer in Colorado if you make it out here.
I'm hoping I can get out. I really want to. I'm not so sure I should drive with my New York plates to Colorado. They might be like, turn around.
I don't think so.
I think you'll be okay.
I think it'll be okay. It seems like people are pretty,
pretty cool.
Here. Frankly, we run on a tourist economy, and I think in a lot of places you'd probably be welcome. So I wouldn't worry about that.
All right. Well, that's good to know, because New York, it's like a Rhode Island. They're pretty much standing at their border going, go home, go home.
Yeah, I don't think it's like that here. So
No,
I think you would be welcome, and we would, certainly love to see you. So.
Well, I want to come back. Colorado is my, in many ways, where my heart lies. So.
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I look forward to seeing you guys again too, and doing some hunting and eating.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll have this up on YouTube for you in a couple hours.
Go eat some sauerkraut.
Yeah, I'm gonna go eat some. I have a little more wine. Thanks, guys. It was fun. Thanks so much.
Good
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.